think a lot of great brokers will go out of business over time because they've failed to adapt at figuring out how to generate additional margins without squeezing it all from the agent themselves.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey, and today I've got a guest who I've interviewed many times before, a good friend of mine here in the Indianapolis market, Eric Forney. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks. I'm excited to talk about things that'll probably either get hate mail or one of us fired. So
yes, that's what go wrong. Anytime we get together and talk, we either create controversy or become thought leaders around the world.
That's right.
Eric, I do want to cover your backstory. You're someone who I really feel like is a wealth of knowledge within the industry, but just not even just within real estate, but just the way you think about building business always fascinates me. You've always got your ear to the ground as to like the next thing. You're even like helping me on Zoom right now, like things that I didn't even know about Zoom, and I'm on Zoom every day. So this is going to be a really good show. But I want to start with your entrance. What I find fascinating is we just established that you were actually the youngest person to ever do 100 million or more in real estate sales in Indianapolis. So you can't hear everyone in their cars, but they're clapping for you.
Thank you. And that's a big deal too, because in Indianapolis, like the governor's mansion is worth like $178,000 or something. So it takes a lot of houses.
It is. It's not. We're not California prices yet.
Right.
Well. But you had very humble beginnings, and if I remember right, you were selling paint, and it wasn't going so well. So tell us how you got into real estate, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah. So one of the things that, my kind of the backstory, if we go all the way back to the beginning, and I'll make it as concise as possible, but, I'm just an idiot kid from Markleville, Indiana, a town of 144 people. There definitely are more cows than there are people in Markleville. And when I was a little kid, I wanted to be Marv Albert. I would sit on the floor and I would watch the NBA on NBC, and then Marv Albert started wearing lingerie, and so I gave up on wanting to be Marv Albert. but I went on to actually get a radio and television scholarship, and worked in TV in some capacity for all of the four major networks, and in my last stint in Tucson, Arizona at the ABC affiliate, I was making $25,000, and I thought, this is going to take me a long time before I can actually earn a legitimate living. And so if I could talk to people on camera for a living, I bet I could just talk to people in person. And so I applied for sales jobs back in Indiana. And the first place that hired me was Sherwin-Williams. And I knew nothing about construction and nothing about paint. And so I started at Sherwin-Williams, worked there for 8 years. And one of the things that I didn't realize at the time was that running a store for Sherwin-Williams, what I had to do was review my P&L every day. Yeah. And it became second nature to understand finances, because I had to consult that P&L and try to make sense of it as a person who'd never taken a business class. And so I went to my P&L every single day, hung it up in the office, and played the game of like me versus me, trying to be a little better every day. But even when I was asked to no longer be an employee of Sherwin-Williams, the last paycheck I had was $39,000 that year. And so what I wasn't doing was being independently wealthy. But what I would watch was that
was the entire year's paycheck.
That was through September that year.
Okay.
So I had some years that were better, some that were worse. I think I started at 36,000 or something. And then on my best year, I think it was at 96 or something. So somewhere in between there. And that year though, in September was 39. And in order to sell paint, you have to have the same customers every single day, because a painter needs a gallon of paint or multiple gallons of paint in order to generate income every day. So I would see the same repeat customers. What I learned was that customer service and how you treat people never goes out of style. Yeah. And so we build a business based on knowing how to read the P&L and then treat people the right way. But what I realized was most of my customers were making more money than I was. And they were doing that like by flipping houses and investing in real estate. And so as a arrogant 25-year-old kid, I thought, well, I could just flip a house. That can't be that hard. I'll just flip 4 houses and never sell real estate or never sell paint ever again. And it was 2009. So you can imagine how well that went.
Yeah.
I flopped rather than flipped. And so finally 3 years later, I ended up selling that house. And
that's a true story. You bought it and didn't sell it for 3 years.
Yeah, that's right, man. Didn't sell it for 3 years, had 75 showings in 90 days.
Oh,
and what I wanted to do was just get a real estate license. So I never had to deal with real estate agents ever again, because the experience that I had was one where I was just so disappointed, and the customer experience, the amount of like time on task, and obviously the result. So I just want to get licensed so I never had to deal with a real estate agent ever again. And now all I do is deal with real estate agents all day, every day.
Basis.
So that worked
from every
really
angle
well.
Too, because you've got your team, you've got your own sales. I love it.
Yeah. So I got into real estate, and then when I was asked to no longer be an employee of Sherwin-Williams, went on then to sell. I think I sold 128 houses that first year full time. That I after getting out of the paint world, and then we built a team in 2017. And somehow found success pretty quickly. We were the top team in Keller Williams for Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, and in that region. And then we've grown really every year since. And so I've really just kind of seen and done almost every position in the industry as we've evolved, really without any intention of ever doing this. I just wanted to not sell paint.
Man. So how's that for an intro? I love it. Well, you were talking in the pre-show about your fascination with one of our mutual friends, Dick Richwine, who's maybe one of the most renowned realtors in Indiana history, the first one to breach 100 million. But he's old school. And you said something about what you learned at Sherwin-Williams, not going out of style, is communication with people and handling customers. What have you gleaned from Dick that you feel like, because if I had to listen to both you guys talk, you actually have a lot more, at least knowledge or fascination around the progressive nature of real estate and technology, but you still, hold true to some of the stuff you say. So what is that about?
Well, absolutely. So, my thought process with this, Remington, is that fundamentally what makes people different than robots is that we have the ability to exercise creative problem solving. And it's that creative problem solving and that ability to connect on an empathetic level with people that makes us irreplaceable and non-replicatable. And so the way I think about the business is that what we should be doing every day as both agents and as business owners is doing the tasks that cannot be outsourced, either today or in the future. And so what I mean by that is what can't be outsourced is how you make people feel when you interact with them. And so what I learned from that made me successful at selling paint was that customer service never goes out of style. Jeff Bezos has this concept that I subscribe to, and it's this idea that like in the future, you should stop trying to predict what will happen and instead predict what won't happen, as in what won't change with technology or with what won't change with innovation. And at Amazon, they say that the things that won't change are that the consumer will always want a diverse selection. They'll always want it faster, and they'll always want it for less money. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, those truths never go out of style, whether it's Montgomery Ward in 1858 or whether it's Amazon. Those are fundamental truths. And so we look at then, okay, well, what are the fundamental truths that won't change in real estate? And there are a lot of those commonalities, right? Is that at the end of the day, the consumer will want it done faster. They'll want it done. They'll want to sell with less hassle, and they'll want to sell for top dollar. netting to themselves. And so the fundamental truths are faster, cheaper, more money.
So you're opening up a Redfin brokerage is what you're saying.
Well, I said more money. I didn't say lower fees. So there's a subtle distinction between the two.
I'm kind of poking fun, but this is what we're going to get into today. What I'm really fascinated about is your journey through Keller Williams and all the different avenues that it offers as a brokerage itself, but then the future of brokerages. I think you just have this fascinating perspective, because if you look at Keller Williams in the indie market, it was the original disruptor. I feel like I could be wrong, but after talking to people, in the last 20 years, Keller Williams was the first disruptor to kind of do things different than the traditional brokerage. In fact, in Indiana, still two of the largest brokerages, at least by size, are still independents that are not national brands. Yeah. So then you have Keller Williams come in and they're doing things completely different. And the model is fascinating to me because it's a multi-level marketing within a real estate company, but also you sell real estate and there's profit sharing. And then flash forward 10 years, there's a new spinoff of Keller Williams. Yep. EXP and some of these other brokerages that are now disrupting what Keller Williams once disrupted. So you've got that dynamic. You personally, all while this is going on, decided to own your own Keller Williams franchise, sold that, and now where you currently sit is you were actually teamed up with Gary Keller, as I understand it, and you're going to explain this better than I can, but Gary Keller established teams across in different cities that he wanted to personally own and maybe not operate. And yours is one of those teams. Out of 96 teams across the nation, you sit in a room with Gary Keller on a regular basis. So pretty fascinating. I mean, you're a rock star yourself, but you're sitting in a room with a billionaire. That's got to elevate the conversation a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, this was an easy decision for me, Remington, because I got a call, what was April of 2021. I'm big about telling people to make goals and to, have a vision of what they want for their life. But the reality is most of it is only worth doing for the exercise, because what's not on my list of goals to accomplish was to basically sell a team to Gary Keller and then have a partnership in some business that never existed 5 years ago. But it was an easy decision. And the reason why it was an easy decision when I got the call was because I thought through the framework of, when I'm 80 years old, will I be glad that I said yes, regardless of the outcome, or will I regret that I said no? And when you think about it, there are only a couple thousand billionaires in the world, and there are very few who are self-made. And so my thought process with that goes, can I learn something from a guy who has been the most influential person in residential real estate for 2 decades in a row, who just so happens to be a self-made billionaire of the largest real estate company in the world? If I can't better my life by being around that group of people, then it's a me problem. And so it was an easy decision. And so the kind of the evolution to wind back to how do you go from brokerage to, how do you go from team to broker owner to back to this team model? What happened was during a pandemic, my lease came up at the market center, and my lease came up and there are 4 market centers here in Indianapolis, and I'm looking at, do I sign a 10-year commitment as the youngest person to own a Keller Williams franchise? Do I commit myself to another decade of physically based office where we're splitting the cost of resources across 4 separate franchises? Or would it make more sense that we centralize our resources so that we get the economy of scale and we provide better services to the agents if we work together than if we work apart? And so it became really easy to go, in 10 years, will I be glad that I own this, or will I regret that I do? Is this the best long-range decision? And when I looked at it, here's the interesting thing that I saw that I think a lot of people have missed. And kind of really what prompted this Livian venture for Gary was that, 10 years ago, teams accounted for only 10% of Keller Williams sales.
Oh,
And
wow.
today, 40% of the sales done at Keller Williams are done by teams. So teams have,
That's 10 years ago. Only
yeah,
10% of revenue came from teamwork within KW.
yep, correct. And now 40% of all transactions are done by teams.
And you
Yeah,
dropped Livian. Is that the initiative that's his 96 teams is Livian?
correct. Yep. So then the thought process was, well, if this is this kind of silent avalanche that's been happening in the industry, and the thing is, it's been happening slowly, right? Is like I was meeting with Steve Murray, who's like the Smithsonian of real estate, and we were talking that in 2011, individual agents outperformed teams. So the top 100 agents in the country that were on, like park benches and grocery carts and billboards, they outsold the top 100 teams that year. And then 2012 was the first year that the top 100 teams outperformed the top agents. And then it's gotten just messy ever since, where the teams have just cannibalized more and more and more market share. And there's a lot of reasons why, but what's been happening simultaneously that's allowed teams to really step up and fill a void is that these non-physically based businesses and flat fee brokerages have come along on a race to the bottom. And the race to the bottom has really depleted the margins in the real estate brokerage business. And so teams have stepped up to fill a gap that emerged by racing to the bottom with brokerage margins. And so teams now provide value in a way that brokerages would have provided 2 decades ago.
It's fascinating you say that because, and they're going to remain nameless, but a top broker here in Indy, president, I was approaching about a product, talking about the potential of it. And what came up was, we're actually opening up our own title company and our own mortgage company. And I said, why? And they said, because you have to. There's no way to make money as a brokerage unless you do this. And this is someone that has great market share, a ton of agents, really well-owned business. And that was the answer. And that was pretty fascinating to me. And so now you flash forward a little bit and you've got some of these internet-based companies like EXP. So you think the writing is on the wall. What is the direction of, well, actually I have 2 questions. Let me back up because I don't want to go past this. Why does Gary want to own 96 teams? Like, why does he want to own anything outside of Keller Williams Real Estate, which, I mean, he doesn't need the money. He doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
What's happening there? Why does he care enough to own a team in Indiana?
Yeah, that's actually the fun part. I'm not going to lie. I was watching this clip the other day from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they were talking about some of the best businesses that they buy or invest in. The very worst ones are when the owners or the managers do the job for the money. And the very best investments they've ever made is when the business owner does it for the love of the business. And I think about it as like when you were a kid, Remington, you probably went outside and like played pickup ball with your buddies, and you didn't have an NBA contract and a shoe deal like you do now. And so you just played for the love of it.
Yeah.
And that's Gary. Gary's unabashedly said that realtor will be on his headstone when he dies.
Keeps him young.
What's that?
It keeps him young. Keeps him young,
and he's passionate about it. I think there's, one of the things that's been most surprising to me about working with Gary is how kind he is. That was surprising to me because when you see him on stage, that's not the persona that you oftentimes get, but his patience and kindness and his the way that he really has the heart of a teacher. I think he loves to teach. It's like Bobby Bowden or, an old coach who just loves to teach young people. I think in large reason Gary does this because it's teaching. I think the other reason why is that it also is a good business model for the Keller Williams brokerage. And that's because we all actually want the same thing. And there's a way to make it symbiotic to where it's a win. Is we're pretty much guaranteed income for the brokerage. I'm going to get out of bed this morning. No one needs to call me and figure out if I'm going to go go show up for work today. So we're pretty much guaranteed income to the market center. Yeah. And that's a good thing from a stability standpoint as a business owner, if you're a broker owner. And then secondarily, we're in a contract with Keller Williams, so I'm not going anywhere else.
Right.
And that also creates some stability for the brokerage. And then we also create an opportunity to fill a gap that exists inside of brokerages, which amounts to be really more of like a hands-on high service product. We generate leads, we teach, train, coach agents every single day. That's incredibly difficult for a brokerage to do because their margins aren't high enough. And right. Then, the thing that's, and then secondarily, the thing that we're working on, partnering with brokerages as well, is helping them build teams that they own inside of their market center, inside of their brokerage. So Gary looks at it as kind of the next evolution, and I'm putting words into his mouth, right? This isn't a KW endorsed statement, but right. I think he looks at it as the extension of the next iteration of real estate, which is brokerages becoming teamerages and having high-powered teams.
So then let's talk about that. This is the perspective for up until now. We've kind of showed how you have gotten to this point in your career, what you have chosen to do based on your knowledge, which is vast, and this is what you chose. So then based on that, what do you believe the direction is for brick and mortar brokerages? And what do you predict, and how would you react to this prediction?
Yeah, I think that a lot of them will go out of business. A lot of them that had really good businesses will go out of business if they don't make adjustments. And we could debate as to whether or not ancillary business and ancillary revenue is sufficient or not. But what I don't think will happen is that agents will agree over time, especially in a compressing market, to pay their broker more money. And so what I found as an owner is it would have been incredibly difficult for me to go and raise my top line revenue as a broker owner because there's a lot of options in the marketplace. And so I think a lot of great brokers will go out of business over time because they've failed to adapt at figuring out how to generate additional margins without squeezing it all from the agent themselves.
So what does that look like? You've kind of answered it a little bit, but if you had to create if you had to, what's that show where they bar rescue? Yeah. If you had to do brokerage rescue and go in and establish maybe a dying brand or a dying brokerage, what would be your step-by-step process to assess and create a plan to save it?
I'd build a profitable team inside of the brokerage. So I would generate leads and teach agents how to convert leads. And if I didn't, as the broker owner, know how to do it, I'd find the best person in the market who knows how to do that and has a proven track record to do it, because fundamentally it's not as easy as it seems. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of high performing teams, and there just are not.
You're talking about internet leads.
Yeah, internet leads or from your database directly, like people that you've already met. So I would go in and I would help convert and generate leads for real estate agents in exchange for some portion of the commission. And then I would also, I'd also kind of co-op with our teams a way in which is a win-win. And I would try to have as many high-performing teams that I could use to predictably pay my overhead every month, be partnered with the office in a way in which is a win-win. And then I would still you're still going to need a crop of individual agents, but progressively over time, the trend says fewer and fewer individual agents exist comparative to teams. So what used to take, say 100 agents to make $100,000, I'm just making this number up, would now due to teams would mean that you're going to have closer to 300 agents in order to make the same income, because teams have become a larger share of the agent count. There is still a way to symbiotically help teams and be a broker owner, but you have to craft a more of a win-win scenario than maybe what it was in the past.
What about the actual building itself? Do you need to have what would you do with that? Is that a dying art as well? Are we going digital? Do we need an office building?
That's a tough one, man. We look at that, kind of, I don't know that I have a clear answer to that. And I only say because, historically, I was always a physically based business fan. We always ran our team that way. And then obviously 2020 shows up. Now, given my role with Livian, I see teams across 96 markets. Some of them are able to have a lot of success purely digitally based. Some are fundamentally all physically based. I think the balance is you have to figure out, as a broker owner, you have to decide is how do you maximize revenue per foot. So think of it instead like a retail store. And you look at what Apple has done. Apple has really redefined the retail space by making it the most profitable business per square foot in all of retail. And so what does that look like from a brokerage standpoint? I've thought that's somewhat of a toll road model, where rather than getting a flat tax across the board, you have a usage fee or some way to bill back service rendered.
Yeah, well, that's what's interesting to me is for me, it's not necessarily having the office, is what you do with it. Because Correct. If I think about my own life, I'm not a realtor, but I'm in the space and I work one day at home. It's Wednesdays. And I do that because I want to spend more time with my wife throughout the week and not just wait till nights and weekends. And that one day at home allows me to do that. It's also a day where if I need to have contractors over, I can just be at home. That Wednesday is the hardest day to have productivity between kids and dogs and noise and just doorbell ringing. I've got to think as realtors, a lot of their space is out in the field and showing houses and meeting in coffee shops and actually going and grooming clients. But I'd have to think that if done properly, it still would make sense that I would sell more real estate if I got out of my house and into an office to focus for part of my week. Is that still true?
I think that's true. The challenge becomes is how often do agents actually focus when they're in offices versus how many times are they interrupted by other agents? And you could make an argument as a broker owner that that's still a positive. That social connectedness causes retention. And so it may not actually increase productivity, but it may increase retention by increasing the social bond strength. I think that's where thinking through the concept of like how you use the space in a way that maximizes revenue per foot is the approach, rather than thinking about like, is it a yes or no question? Is how much diversity could you have with it? Can your conference room, can your meeting room double as a remote closing room where you charge a remote notary fee? How do you take what was your training room and convert it into a revenue stream? I like to look at my P&L and flip it upside down and go, okay, these expenses, what if I had to turn all my expenses into a revenue stream instead? What would that look like? What would I do fundamentally different if I had to make money on the things that currently cost me money?
Yes.
And could I put them in my business model?
That's how I got into investing. I was tired of paying money every time I went somewhere. I picked one of the same places over and over again. You just got to buy real estate there and make money instead of. So I've said it before, even on this podcast, I just love the way your mind thinks and you think about things differently and you come up with these things. And then you also listen to what's going on and pivot. I remember your take on you were shipping checks in Uber at one point because you didn't think it wasn't worth your time. I mean, are you still doing that, or do they crack down that, legality of that?
It's so funny. I forget about some of these things that just piss people off. These these old Karens and that are licensed that have always done it the same way get so fired up about it. I haven't shown a house in 3 years, but man, I'm always amazed by some of the hate I still get for things that I'm actually not even involved in. But you're right. I've shipped car seats and earnest money checks with Uber. The thought being that if they'll transport your family, why won't they take a check? That's a far better use of my time than delivering the earnest money myself. Now obviously they've got online digital payments. I've done way too many controversial things, but like, I got rid of our front desk at the brokerage, and it was met with mixed reviews. My thought process behind it was that you're not far from never checking out with someone at a grocery store ever again. And it goes back to this same belief of mine. Fundamentally, if a human can't do something that can't be replaced by a computer or a robot, some piece of AI, then it shouldn't be done. Because it's only a matter of time when it will be done by innovation. So the only people business should employ are the ones that do non-duplicatable, non-replicatable work. And if that's someone receiving checks, answering calls, and getting water and coffee for you, then it only makes sense that we would do away with that position. But it wasn't widely cheered for when that happened, but just is what it is. It's the way things are going.
Well, what's fascinating about AI in our generation or this day and age is that the next step is that it's going to take more jobs because of what it's capable of doing. But if you look historically at literally the printing press, the automobile, the computer, like we said these same things over and over again, but these were things that literally radically changed. I mean, we were literally having 10 guys in a room write the same thing to disperse the information. Then the printing press came and I imagine, I haven't read a history book in a minute about it, but people were probably like, oh, I'm out of a job now. But then you pivot as a society to find more fulfilling ways to actually do work and be utilized by the society. I can't imagine that we would also find, no matter how good AI gets at some of these jobs that people hold, I imagine most of the jobs they take are from people who didn't really enjoy their job in the first place.
Well, and it's not their highest and best use. I mean, I don't know about you. You're probably world-class horseshoer, but
really
that
good.
Was an actual job pre-automobile, right? Somebody made buggies and drove them and made whips and everything else that's been phased out into.
Unless you're in Northern Indiana. I'm not sure the last time you drove in Northern Indiana.
I haven't been there in a while, but I fully endorse going there for all baked goods. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say chocolates and jerky.
But that's the direction things are going. So like the interesting thing is, I've got this role at Livian. My title is VP of Industry and Innovation, and I joke that's it's like when Simba and Mufasa sit together on Pride Rock and they look out and everything the light touches. That's kind of what it's like to have the VP of Industry role, because that's super constrained, is all things real estate industry and innovation. But I wake up every day and think about how do I put agents out of business? Now breathe through that. There's somebody that just got triggered because you wake up and think that I'm actually trying to put agents out of business. But what I mean by that is, how do we actually elevate the effectiveness and the experience that people get by working with real estate agents? There was a point in time when realtors ran a cartel, and that cartel was the cartel of information and access, right? Pre-MLS and pre-Zillow, if you wanted to know the value of a home, or you wanted to know if what 123 Main Street looked like inside, the cartel had access exclusively to that information, and you had to pay the toll to gain information. And it's my belief that technology disrupts little by little those incremental like gatekeeper components of industries. And so today, realtors have to then go up the ladder of delivering value, and instead think about how do they become consultants, and then how do you deliver like concierge, and then how do you build community, and by doing that, you become a hub for home ownership. But it shouldn't be the agent has to be the person who sets up your search. It shouldn't be that the real estate agent has to be the one that is proactively determining whether to send you their preferred lender or not. Those are things that can be done based solely on behavior responses. And so how do we narrow what agents do so they actually deliver more value? Yeah.
Well, doctors didn't freak out when WebMD became a thing. They just have to take an extra step to explain why WebMD is not going to fix your heart. or your brain.
Yeah.
Now, granted, selling homes is not brain surgery.
No.
I've only sold a couple as I'm not a realtor like you,
Yeah.
but I definitely see the correlation in like a professional who understands how to do something better. I mean, we've always said, listen, it's not about how much money you're giving someone to do a job, it's how much money and time and effort you're saving and maybe even making because you hire that professional. If a realtor is going to provide me more money on the home or less headaches, less time, and do it all for me, and I am willing to pay that fee, why on earth would I want to do that myself? I just don't see that ever going away, including AI.
No, it'll just shave off the incremental work that's low dollar producing. The do I need to send you the same canned recipe for Thanksgiving garbage your title company has been sending you preemptively, or would it make more sense to send you marketing based on your behavior and based on whether you own a home or don't own a home, whether your credit score is 550 or 750? You need a different message based on your profile, and so the generic buckshot approach that people take today is something that should go away in within 30 to 90 days, if not already. And so we'll start to incrementally whittle down some of that low talent generic work, and allow people who love to wake up and serve people by giving them a high degree of customer experience. We'll elevate the value those people deliver with AI. But I think this is the fun part. The fun part of it's like, the last innovation in real estate was electronic signatures. That's a decade plus, and so it's time to iterate on that. And so, when you look at it, is the fun part is that, right now the market is one in which is, we've got almost, we got 2 million fewer transactions than what we had 2 years ago. And that's not going to change anytime soon. And that's the exciting part, is watching that adaptation to a market that is even, I love this, everybody wakes up and goes, well, but when interest rates go down, then things will change. And then you go, awesome. So is the reason that no one's moving because of interest rates or because of inventory? How will interest rates change the inventory problem that exists? There's 4.5 million plus houses that are short right now from a total inventory perspective. How exactly do interest rates solve that problem? What we really have is a demographic constraint combined with an inventory constraint. And so you got this.
Well, let me ask you something about that.
Yeah.
Help me understand better. The argument that I've heard is that because I'm locked into a 2 or 3% interest rate, I'm not going to sell my home if I have to get into a 7 or 8%. And that's why the inventory. So it does. I mean, the argument is that the interest rate does affect the inventory. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I understand the premise behind it, but if we believe that's fundamentally the only thing that causes people to buy and sell real estate, we've never listened to our consumers and never thought about the decisions we make ourselves. Rates were 4% before they were 2.5% for multiple years, and it didn't cause sellers to just dump their house on the market. The reality is the majority of people who choose to sell because of a life event. Mm-hmm. And there isn't an interest rate that causes life events other than mass credit collapse, and that's not on the table either. So the reality is that what we really have is this convergence of demographics and inventory. And so, without nerding out too bad, if you look back to the rate of new construction during 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, it significantly fell short of what was necessary to keep up with the amount of millennials that were heading into that first time buyer market. And now you've got Gen Z becoming 30 to 40-year-old soon as well. And so you end up with the highest population in American history at prime buying age and nothing to sell them. Yeah. And so that doesn't change until you see either some innovation to create inventory, or you see boomers start to liquidate some inventory that because they're moving into a different scenario of life. But the reality is the faster that agents opt to figure out how to win in this market, the better off they'll be. But we're not going back to the way it used to be. This ain't your granddaddy's housing market, and we're not going back there anytime soon.
Well, we're out of time, Eric, but as always, my mind is blown by some of the stuff we're talking about. I do think the encouraging thing, or like maybe my takeaway from what you're saying, if I'm piecing it together right, is that on the AI subject, if I'm the real estate professional or any business professional for that matter that looks at AI and gets excited and says, wow, I could use that.
Yeah.
Versus, oh no, they're coming for my job. It might make sense to look in the mirror before anything and figure out the value that you are bringing the marketplace before assessing any outside entity. Is that a good assessment?
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to absolutely decide if to your analogy of a physician and WebMD is just optimal, because all of the medical information exists on the internet today, period. What is difficult for the consumer is to triangulate all of the information and then distill it into an actionable treatment plan that creates the desired result. That job still belongs to the agent. It should have and won't become cartel of information. It has to shift to distilling customer experience to become a consultant, provide a concierge level product, build a community, feed the community, and have a sustainable business that you can feed both yourself and any subsequent amount of people that you add to it.
I love it. That was Eric Forney being mentored by the great Gary Keller himself, the youngest billionaire in real estate to become. That'll be your next title. Next time you do that, you'll be on the next podcast.
Let's do it.
Thanks for joining us, man. We'll see you next time on Real Producers Podcast. Find us at realproducersmag.com. We'll see you.